Thank you for joining us on She's with the Band.
In this episode, Sue gives some exclusive anecdotes and wild stories to describe how important the 1960s and 70s were for music history and just how special that decade of her life was.
She's with the band. She's with the band.
This podcast is brought to you by Dover Street Productions and may contain some content that some listeners might find offensive.
Let's begin. We know it was a huge TV show at the time, but can you tell us a bit more about your experience with Top of the Pops? And what would you do after? Would you go out together or...?
Well, before I worked in the music business, they used to have people from the public would dance. You'd see them on television and they were dancing amongst the cameras. It was the same on Ready, Steady, Go. All these bloody great big cameras, on wheels. And then they'd swing the thing. Had to be careful not to get knocked out. So I used to go there just as maybe when I was at Moore Brigade, when I was at Secretarial College, you used to just rock up and they thought you looked okay, you're in. And so I used to go there then. And then when I was writing for whoever I was writing for, one would always go there in the hope that you'd get an interview with someone or a juicy bit of whatever. Exactly the same with Ready, Steady, Go. Ready, Steady, Go was Friday, Top of the Pops was Thursday. And you just rock up and you start chatting to people. You'd had no pre-arranged interview or anything like that. You just hoped that you'd latch on to somebody and they'd be in the mood to chat to you in between the cameras swinging round. So Top of the Pops, sometimes it would be prearranged, especially with the Beatles Monthly and the Rolling Stones Monthly. That's how you caught them, because it was very difficult to get to see the Beatles, to have a one-on-one with Beatles. Only the esteemed writers like Maureen Cleave, who wrote for The Standard, I think I've said before, she'd get her one-on-ones. And Ray Connolly, he was a Liverpudlian, so he knew the Beatles from there. Ray Connolly wrote for The Standard, so he'd have his one-on-ones. Actually, Ray Connolly was our screenwriter for the movie I was doing when I lived in LA, for John Lennon's early life. And so he had so many stories. So they were the prestigious, because they wrote for that. Oh, and John Short, he was the showbiz editor of The Mirror. Mike Housego was from The Sketch. I can't remember any other national people, but they didn't so much do one-on-one things, those two. But there was a showbiz writer. He was very well known. He did all the major film stars. He was called Donald Zeck. And he was big time. I mean, he interviewed Taylor and Burton and people of that caliber. But he probably did the Beatles, or one of them, or maybe McCartney, maybe I don't know. But the music writers, sort of a lot of them had to take crumbs. And I was female, so they were always wanting to see me more than they wanted to see the guys. We were prettier than those guys at the time. They weren't very attractive lot. So Maureen, Penny and I, we were quids in, really. They go, you want to go? And go, oh, yes, fine. So what would happen, there was a green room, as you know, whatever television show you do, there's a green room. But after Top of the Pops, everybody went to the BBC bar. It wasn't the green room as such, it was the BBC bar. I sort of remember it being at the top of the building, I think. I don't know. So there could have been a lot of other shows being recorded at the time or live. So it wasn't only Top of the Pops that would people be up there. It could be a talk show host. So everybody used to mix and mingle. And it was fun. Some of the guys that didn't live in London, and well, most of them didn't in the groups at the time. Very few people lived in London. Lulu lived in London. She used to hang around with this group of guys. She was one of the guys, Lulu. Yes, and so if you were seeing somebody or not, as the case may be, you were just friends, usually you'd go out afterwards to a club, to a bar, to back to their hotel. They'd have wherever they were staying. A lot of them stayed in these hotels in Bayswater. There were loads of, well, I think there still are loads of hotels in Bayswater, round the back there of the Bayswater Road. Jerry Marsden didn't, though. I always remember going to see him at the Kensington Palace Hotel for some reason. He didn't stay in Bayswater. He set himself apart there. Oh, there was one dreadful situation one night. I was there at Top of the Pops, and I think I was going out for a drink. We might have been going to a club. I can't actually remember, but I was with this person who I was very friendly with, and we were going to drive back into town. Well, not that Shepherd's Bush was that far, but I didn't have my own car then. I didn't get my own car till just before I was 21. I used to borrow my mother's car. So I was in the car at Top of the Pops to drive back into town down the Basil. He said, I'll drive. Well, this idiot here, you didn't like to say no to these people in case you got grief. Oh, God. It was a really wet night. I mean, I can't believe that I allowed him to drive this car. And the rain is coming down really heavily, and he is driving so fast. I'm going, slow down, slow down. I'm going to have an accident if you keep driving like this. And then in the middle of the Bayswater Road, when I say the middle, I don't mean in the middle of the road, in the middle, halfway between Top of the Pops and Marble Arch, say, and right near the hotel where they were staying, that part of it, he decided to overtake. And it's pitch black. Everybody's got their headlights on and they're glaring at you coming forward, and the rain is bucketing down. I could see it. I could see it coming. I knew what was going to happen. He just overtook. I thought, I'm going to die. I am going to die. And we hit something. I thought we'd hit the car, the oncoming car, because the car went like that, and then the car kind of stopped when it was sort of leaning towards the left, and he screamed at me. He said, get out, swap seats. I thought I was like on autopilot. I didn't know what was happening, because obviously if somebody had reported us, he couldn't be seen because he was very well known, and he practically shoved me into the driver's seat. He got in the passenger seat. And I didn't know how badly the car was damaged. I couldn't think straight, let alone look straight. So wherever we were going at the time, whether we were going to a club, we didn't end up at this club. We got back to the hotel. The car was drivable, thank God. And we'd hit a bollard. I mean, that was serious. I was in such a state. And one of the other band members poured brandy down my throat. I didn't drink scotch or brandy. I drank vodka. Vodka and lime was my drink. How I could have drunk vodka and lime, it's so sweet. I was in such a state. And my nerves were so shot that they booked my own room for me. They couldn't let me go home in the state I was in, drive home. So they booked a room for me in the hotel where I stayed that night. When my mother got home, whenever, she could have been a week later, it could have been a few days later. She'd gone away anyway. And then I had to tell her what happened. The damage to the car wasn't actually that bad. It was all along the side of the car. And I told her what had happened. She was just apoplectic. And she didn't believe me, because she knows what I'm like. She didn't believe me. She made me get in the car with her, drive down the Bayswater Road to show her the bollard that we'd hit. And the bollard, thank God, they hadn't taken it away, the roads department of Westminster, to fix it. It was there, the bollard was there, all sort of ski-whiff. She said, I don't believe you, you're lying. What really happened? I said, I. Otherwise, oh my God, that would have been the end of me. If it would have been we, I came very close to meeting my maker, I think, that night. I think he was very shaken up as well. Very shaken up. It was just like you see in the movies. It was a movie. The whole thing was a movie. Yes, that's one of the standout things of having been at Top of the Pops, especially when I was with the Beatles and the Stones. I used to get lots of snippets when I used to be chatting to them. We're chatting about anything. Where have you been? What have you done? What's happening with your love life? But they all had girlfriends. The Stones all had girlfriends. So for a time, I was quite friendly with Chrissy Shrimpton, who was Mick's girlfriend, Jean Shrimpton's sister. She was just delightful, Chrissy, so pretty. Chrissy was stunningly pretty, very tall. And then Keith was going out with Linda Keith, who was another model. Oh, I knew Linda. She was gorgeous. She was dark-haired. Well, Charlie was always married to Shirley from day one, so always went home to Shirley. Charlie never went out after, always went home. That's where he wanted to be, with Shirley. And then there was Bill. Bill was not with any, because he and Diane, I think that was his wife, had split up. Yes, because he had Stephen, his son, that he used to see when he could, who was quite young at the time. And I said, was that all of them? Oh, Brian. I forgot about Brian. I knew there was another one. Brian, yes. Well, Brian and I were quite friendly, put it that way. We had our moments. And he was very troubled, Brian. He was damaged. He could be incredibly sweet, Brian, and at the same time he had that other side to him that he wasn't so nice to people. He was never like that with me. He was always very nice and very well mannered. He spoke very nicely. He was interested in. Brian used to like to go out shopping, always clubbing, very sociable, and he could be amusing too. He could be very, very courtly in a way. He had very nice manners. Everybody had nice manners. Nobody was horrible at all. But when they all got together, they could be a bit of a handful because they had all their little in things and all their pet names for people that you couldn't say because it wouldn't be very PC nowadays. You'd have the police coming round your door. They were all very naughty, but at the same time, they were so serious about their music. So serious about their music.
During these wild times, did you have many best friends that stayed with you throughout? Because I remember you mentioning how close you were with Maureen and Penny.
Maureen and I, because we were journalists, because Penny had left by then, Penny was at Disc, but I was very friendly. They were my friends, socialised with in the business. I had other friends. I had lots of friends in all different walks of life. But Penny, Maureen and I were invited to the same things. And Maureen and I worked there together for quite a while before she left for Rave. So we'd always go to the record company parties and whatever, or go clubbing, meet up and go wherever. And then Maureen and Penny moved in together. They rented a flat. This was, after I was probably with the Beatles and Stones by then. I could have been with NME. I don't know when they rented this flat together in Chelsea, off the Embankment. They were in this basement flat, which Maureen lives in till this day. She bought it donkeys years ago. She's still there. Great location. And I was the only one with a car. And if you know that area, the Embankment, you're not on top of a shop. And the nearest transport to you is Sloane Square Station. And they didn't have a washing machine. So because I had the car, they used to load up their weekly wash. And on a Saturday, not every Saturday, but I'd pop round there, take Penny in the car, round to the laundrette. I can't remember if I guess we did sit at the laundrette, or maybe I left her there. I have no idea. All I do know is that my car got stolen outside of their flat once, my fabulous Mini. my John Sprinzell Mini. That's all the pop stars used to go to John Sprinzell in a Mews off the Bayswater Road. It was my first Mini, the one that was bought for me. It was a Mini Cooper. It was my 21st present. And it was stolen from outside their house. Well, in those days, the police always used to find it. Not today. They steal the cars on order, don't they? And they're sent abroad. No, they found it, I don't know, in Lambeth or something 2 days later. I did get it back. Yeah. Then when I worked at EMI, Penny was still at Disc and Maureen was at Rave. I can't tell you exactly where their offices were, but they were nowhere near EMI. They were probably EC1 or WC2, or that's where most of the publications were. But because I was in Manchester Square, there were some very nice restaurants around that area, Blandford Street. And what we used to do, there was one called Verbenella, an Italian restaurant, which I think is still there today, I've got a feeling. Anyway, when it was our birthdays, for some reason, I've got in my head that Maureen was April the 18th. Penny was the 13th of February. She just missed Penny Valentine. She just missed Valentine's Day. Penny was the 13th and I was June the 7th. Tom Jones and I had the same birthday, but he was quite a few years older than me. The two whose birthday it wasn't took the birthday girl out for lunch at Verbenella's. And we used to arrange to meet at 1 o'clock. I mean, it took me 5 minutes to walk round there. And without fail, both of them arriving separately, they would turn up nearer to 1:30. I used to get so peed off because I was so punctual. And even though I knew they were going to be late, I couldn't be late in case they would have turned up on time. And so I used to have to sit there looking at my watch every few minutes. But so we used to get together doing that. And Maureen lived off Rosebery Avenue, where Sadler's Wells is, and Penny lived, when she lived with her parents, in a mansion block behind Tottenham Court Road, sort of round the back of the British Museum. And Maggie lived in Covent Garden. It wasn't cool then, Covent Garden. Like Notting Hill wasn't cool, where my office was. Her parents were very strict Greeks. Maggie Coomey, very strict Greeks. I think that's why she probably didn't come out with us. I think her father would have given her a backhand if he knew what us, Penny, Maureen and I used to get up to. No, her parents were very strict with her. So Maggie, I wasn't in touch with Maggie after I was out of the music business for a long time, although she did live in Spain. And the first time I saw Maggie, although I did speak to her when she had got the job with Hello, I called her to congratulate her. And I hadn't seen Maureen or been in touch with Maureen for donkey's years. And the first time that the three of us were together was for Penny's funeral 20 years ago. Oh, I saw everybody from those days, all the PRs and the journalists from those days. It's the first time I'd seen them all forever. And there was a big reception after at Kenwood House, actually. And it was so sad. Even now I get a bit. She went way before her time, way before she was 59. 20 years, yes. Oh, it's got to be more. Penny was a few years older than me. So anyway, she was 59 when she died. Penny used to always write to me when I lived in LA and tell me what was going on. And when I lived in Marrakesh, she'd write to me as well. Penny and I kept in touch for a long time because the guy she was with for many, many years, John, I used to see socially because he's great friend, after Penny this was, because he was great friends with good friends of mine to this day. He was a male model when Penny went out with him, and he did painting and decorating to pay the bills. And then all of a sudden he was some big shot with A&M Records from nowhere, exactly. But he and Penny had a flat in, I think it was Blandford Street or George Street. So I used to sometimes go round and see them on a weekend. And so Penny and I had stayed in touch for a long time, but I hadn't seen her for quite a few years after I got back from LA, which was 89. And then one day, I don't know how many years later, I called her and we arranged to have lunch, and I had to pull out for whatever reason. And she died, I think, the following year. So I hadn't seen her for a long, long, long time. So we just used to have such fun, and we were very jokey people. We had a good sense of humor. Well, you had to have a good sense of humor. Maureen was always amusing. We all had a dry sense of humor that when I moved to the States, not a lot of people understood. They thought I was being very sarcastic. That's why the Brits used to stick together in LA, because we'd go into work and say, "Oh, have you heard this one? There was the Irishman, the Frenchman, and the Jew." Always telling jokes. They didn't have that kind of humor at all. And the Brits had this wonderful ability of being able to send themselves up rotten, and the Americans just took themselves so seriously. That's a great trait that the Brits have, that they can send themselves up and laugh at themselves. Yes.
Did you keep any memorabilia from these music legends or any signed things?
I used to do their signatures for some fans. I used to sign a few things. I got them down. George was quite easy to do. McCartney's was quite difficult. Ringo's, I can see it was very slanty. Oh, I can see Lennon's as well. I can't believe that I never got them to sign anything. I have nothing signed. All the things I kept, all my memorabilia from the premieres, the 2 premiere invitations, Hard Day's Night and Help, all the stuff off the train in Germany, special menus that had their name for the day. Each day was a Beatles menu for lunch and dinner. All my acetates, all my advance copies, they had a big red A on them. They had a white label with a big red A. I never got anything signed at all. I sold it all years ago. And the Beatles monthlies and the Rolling Stones monthlies, I had them in series for however long I was there. But my mother was selling her house and I was living in LA. I had to go and sort it out she said, "Sort your cupboards out." And I thought, well, she wasn't going to take them with her, and I was living in LA. So I got hold of this guy that I'd heard about that had a vintage record shop. He was quite well known, this guy, somewhere around the back of the Charing Cross Road. And he just took all my stuff. I mean, even then, which was in the 80s, I think he paid me for the acetates with the advanced red, not the albums, these were singles. He paid me £200 a copy then, in the 80s. I should have hung on to it all, but I had nowhere to put it. Nowhere to put it.
Out of the decades since, out of everything, the whole music scene, the London scene, knowing all these super celebs so closely, is there anything that stands out in particular?
Well, I think the whole thing. I think the whole decade, quite honestly. It was the same as any reader of any newspaper or anybody that watched television. Swinging London is what they called it, didn't they? And you were part of this whole revolution. It was just a great time to be the age that I was.
Yeah, I don't think people realize how young everyone was, how young the Beatles were, how young the Stones were, especially how young you were.
Yes, of course. They were all a bit, I mean, Lennon was 6 years older than me. Well, they were all older than me. All the guys were older than me. I was particularly young because, as I said, I was 17 when I started working after I left Moore-Brigade. So can you imagine now that they're studying for their A-levels at 17 now, higher education, which is still a baby. It's a baby. But they didn't seem, we were all so much more sophisticated then, because I'd been there, done it, and got the T-shirt. And I used to go for older guys in those days. I mean, seriously older. I remember dating a guy, it was before John Riley. He was 29 and I was 17.
But what was it like to sit there with Mick Jagger and listen to that song at that time?
What did I think at the time? This is special. Yes, I thought it was special compared to my other friends, that they were all getting married and having babies, and I was rocking and rolling with all these fun, glamorous people. I thought, this is cool. But I don't think I realized the importance that it would have in history till not that long ago, maybe half a dozen years ago or so. I was watching some documentary, and all these people that I used to work with and knew, and I got so nostalgic for it, and I thought, oh God, I was part of this. Wasn't that amazing? I got so sentimental about the whole thing. And when the Stones had an exhibition at the Saatchi Gallery, oh, it was quite recently. I think it was probably only about 4 or 5 years ago, something like that, maybe half a dozen years ago. So it was a fabulous exhibition, and they recreated their one room at Edith Grove. I never went to Edith Grove. I would like to put down on record. God knows what would crawl out of there. It was apparently disgusting. And they did one whole wall at the exhibition of my year. It was all from top of the wall right down the Rolling Stones monthlies, and they were all 65, 66. But I just think to myself, boy, and people nowadays, when they hear what I did then, they kind of can't believe it. The younger people, they think it's unbelievable, and they want to know about it because they're into their music now. When I'm talking about young people, I'm talking about, well, I'm not saying they're into their music, but even teenagers, like my nephew, he says, cool. And he listened to a playback of the recording the other day. I wanted to know what he thought. And I thought, oh, he's not going to be into this. He's into rap music and Kendrick Lamar and all these people. And so I sent it to him, and I wanted to know what he thought. And he said, oh, you sound really good. He sent me a text. You sound really good. He said it flows really well, and it's funny stroke interesting. I thought, oh my God, that's praise. That is praise. And I was really surprised. But they like to hear about my escapades when they're amusing, because I had some very hairy incidents when I lived in Marrakesh. I mean, kidnappings and all this kind of thing. And they love hearing about that. Oh, tell us about the time that you were abducted to the desert. And I have a niece in the music business. She's a PR. She just thinks it was so cool what I did. And sometimes, because I was in PR for a short time when I was at EMI. And then I sent her this text, because our whole conversations are always by text. She's never got time to. I said, did you know that Atlantic hired me in 1974 when I first went to LA? No sooner as I got into LA, they hired me to work as artist liaison in New York. And she went, are you being serious? I said, no, I'm absolutely being serious. I mean, the greatest job ever. They had all the major British bands, everybody, and that would have been sensational. But there was this whole thing at the time, the merger between the 3 labels, that didn't happen. I was the last to be hired, so I was the first to go. Because the supposed merger between Atlantic, Elektra and Asylum was happening then. And in actual fact, it all fell through, and it didn't happen till about 2 years later. And Annie Ivell, who was a very, very well-known PR in the 60s, she was a legend, Annie. I was very friendly with Annie, very friendly. And she was head of publicity for Warner Brothers Records in New York. And she had set me up with this interview when I got to LA with Herb Belkin, who was head of Atlantic. I walked into his office and we just hit it off straight away. He had the most wonderful sense of humor, and he got me because he was a New Yorker, and the Californians thought we were all being very sarcastic, our dry English sense of humor. Herb got me, and he brought out the best in my humor. I loved him. He was just he turned out to be a brilliant friend, and he was great. And in fact, often after this, we stayed in touch till all through the 70s. And when he came to London, we'd go out for dinner, and there'd always be people he knew from New York in town, and we'd have dinner with them and meet up with whoever he needed to meet up with business-wise. And one night we were in Tramp, which is very unusual for Herb. He didn't do nightclubs, but we were meeting up with these people. And who is part of this group? Mel Brooks. Mel Brooks. I mean, I couldn't believe it. There we were, Mel Brooks and I, in the disco part. This is not even in the dining room because we'd been out for dinner. We were in the disco where you can hardly hear yourself. And Mel Brooks and I played, if you were on the, it was like Desert Island Discs. If you're on the desert island, you know, what would you this? What book would you take? What music? What would you, how would you eat? What instrument? Whatever one. So we played this game. It was just wonderful. I laughed so much. And this is not long before I was moving to LA in 81. So this had to have been around 80. And I said, oh, I'm coming out to LA. I'm moving out to LA to, he said, well, what are you going to do? I said, well, I don't know. I said, can I call you when I'm there? He said, sure. I went, yes. He said, and he gave me his business card. He said, call me. I said, you won't know who I am from a bunch of bananas when I arrive there. He said, oh, yes, I will. I will never forget Mortner with an M-A-U and not an M-O-R. That was it. It was like a line from Blazing Saddles. What? I didn't call him. I didn't. There was no point. But it was a fun evening. And that's how it started. But Annie was known for her excessive spending of the company's money. Whoever arrived there, so one of them was say, dating Faye Dunaway of some band at the time. Oh, she'd send flowers to Faye Dunaway and champagne to this one. And they had to kind of curb it a bit. But I was going to be sharing an apartment with Annie that they paid for, Warner Brothers. I thought, this is the greatest job. I was going to be on the planes, flying back and forth to all the gigs. I was going to be the buffer between the artists and the record company. Artist liaison was the greatest job that you could have had for a record company, for what only used to go on those private planes. I mean, because we're talking, this was 1974. Zeppelin had their own plane. Well, can you imagine being on the plane with what used to go on? That was really sex, drugs and rock and roll, wasn't it?
Wow. Oh, well, thank you, Sue. Thank you for everything you have given us, for your stories, for your insights, and for the influence you have had on one of the best periods of music history ever.
She's with the band. She's with the band.
In loving memory of Marilyn Monroe, my partner in crime, and for my mother who always knew best.